So we're going to try something new today. The car casting, take 2, with the awesome new little mini recorder. Investor Empowerment Series radio show, episode number 46. Today we're going to interview Tim Jastrab, TMJ Asset Services. Tim has been a contractor that I've worked with for quite some time. I'm going to guess 5-6 years, maybe more. He's worked on a lot of the REO properties that we manage for the banks out there. I think that's how we initially came across each other, somehow, some way. And he's also worked on my personal rental portfolio as well as some of the flips I've done. And I would say about a year and a half ago or so, Tim started showing a really high interest in flipping on his own. Being Joe Mueller, the type of person that I am, I was 100% supportive of his decision to maybe take a step back from the general contracting aspect of his business and then start working on the investment side, which is really what he wants to do, the fix and flipping and building a rental portfolio. As a matter of fact, I know he listens to the podcast and he often asks questions and comments on some of the things that are said or brought up on the podcast, so I appreciate that. Happy to have him on today as a guest. Again, this is the Investor Empowerment Radio Show, episode number 46. We're going to talk today about newer investor success stories with Tim Jastrab from TMJ Asset Services on his first 3 flips. All right, let's start it.
Welcome to the Investor Empowerment Series radio show, empowering your real estate investing with techniques, opportunities, and information, minus the BS and sales pitches. Now, please welcome the host of the Investor Empowerment Series, Joe Mueller, from the Tough as Nails Investment Syndicate. Joe Mueller.
Welcome to the Investor Empowerment Series radio show. This is episode number 46. We are podcasting from the car today. We'll see how this comes out. Hopefully it comes out good. Today's guest, as I described earlier, is Tim Jastrab from TMJ Asset Services. Tim, thank you for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me. I really, really appreciate all of your hard work and your dedication to the podcast and all of the information that you put forth.
Come on, you suck up. Cut it out.
Yeah,
right,
got to do a little of that.
Yeah, it's all good, man. I appreciate you saying that. I know you listen. Yeah. I brought that up in the intro about how I know you listen to this stuff because you're always asking me questions about stuff that I say or other people say or whatever goes on, and I think that's, it's a good way to learn,
Yeah, absolutely. If you're not listening to stuff, if you're not trying to forward your learning and your information and your business partnerships and everything like that, you're moving backwards. So yep. Absolutely, every little bit helps.
Cool. So, I know you got your start technically a ways back. I know you were flipping down in Aurora at one point,
yep.
And then you kind of put that on hiatus and focus on your general contracting business. Why don't we just kind of give a little history of what you're all about? I know the story, but nobody else does. So let's kind of dive in for a few minutes about who you are and how it all got started.
Okay. My business actually started as a partnership with my best friend back in, I believe it was 99 or 2000. We essentially started a company that serviced foreclosure properties for one specific broker out of Schaumburg. And essentially we started doing like foreclosure cleanouts, all the things necessary for bank servicing, rekeys, winterizations, grass cuts, and so forth. We started servicing that one broker, and eventually, which I don't recommend to anybody as far as with your best friends or anything like that, is partnering with them. That's not the greatest idea. Right. You hear all the horror stories about that. So yes. Eventually we split ways. I created my own TMJ Asset back in 2001 and essentially started servicing brokers. I took on a second part of my business, which I'm a strong believer in not keeping all your eggs in one basket. Basically, it's a foreclosure inspection company that the banks require anytime a property goes into foreclosure, pre-foreclosure, bankruptcy, and so forth. Those properties need to be checked on because if a property were to go vacant in the middle of winter, there's going to be damage to the property. It's the bank's responsibility to maintain those properties and maintain those values of those properties.
Right.
So the banks essentially needed all these contractors during the downturn there that service these vacant houses. And essentially at one point we were doing 3,500 vacancy inspections and bankruptcy inspections and so forth per month. And I had a huge crew of guys doing that. After that started to downturn, which it's still going. The company's still going. We're still doing foreclosures. Still servicing brokers in the local area. Essentially, once that started to downturn, I basically turned back into construction. That was right around 2008 when all the property values were super high. I had a lead on a property in Aurora that I really couldn't pass up, so I basically begged, borrowed, and stealed to purchase the property and flip it. That property was essentially my first personal endeavor into real estate investing and so forth, which I did fairly well.
Before you get too far, let's talk about it. What year was this?
This was 2000. Actually, I bought it in the late 2006.
Okay.
Is when I bought the property,
right
and I actually sold
crash.
it in 2008. Right. Yeah. Right before the crash. So, property values were maxed out. I bought the property super cheap. It was almost a wholesale deal. A listing had just expired. I went and looked at the property, even though it had just expired, and the guy was in foreclosure. He was ready to lose the property, and basically I made him an offer, and he accepted, and we kind of did it through my realtor that was showing me the property. So my realtor kind of double-ended the deal at that time because the listing expired. So it was almost a wholesale deal. I wrote up the contract myself that time, and so forth. But that property, I bought it. I believe it was $190. It was on an acre, unincorporated Aurora, DuPage County, in Illinois. I know there's other people that are listening.
Sure.
And essentially, it was a really niche market there. There's houses literally right across the street that were incorporated in Aurora that were selling at like 600 at the time. Literally, like the house faced these houses. So this property had a lot of potential. It was really run down, but the size of the property was like 2,700 square foot ranch, 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath, and the property was really run down. It had like a flat roof on the back you always talk about how if you could go back and do it again with people on your podcast, there's a lot of things that I would have done differently. This property I basically built to satisfy my own personal tastes, which in turn I spent a lot of money. I did a lot of work. As far as when you're flipping for yourself, it's a ton of work.
Right.
And I did a lot of work. It was major construction. We completely tore off a roof, retrussed it, reconfigured everything. It was major construction. And for it being my first personal flip, my timeline was blown way out of proportion. I had figured that it would originally take me about 8 months. It ended up taking me about 1.5 years.
Wow.
I actually ended up, during owning the property, I actually refinanced it I found a bank that would refinance it at the finished appraised value.
Nice.
At the time, which was good because, at that time the banks were not exactly, how do you say, the banks were not exactly dotting all their I's and crossing all their T's.
All right, so this is still before the crash then, obviously.
Yeah, that was still before the crash.
Giving away money.
Right, they were giving away money. I refinanced the property, got some money to finish it, as well as lowered the payment on the property for the next, I think it was like 6 months later that I actually sold it. So we bought it at like 190. I put about 80 into it. I ended up selling it for 320.
Nice.
So I mean, I did make some money on it. I did pay some bills. I did own it a long time. We paid the taxes on it for that full year. So we did okay. I mean, it was an endeavor. It was a real strain on my family. It was a real strain on me, especially with trying to run a business as well as doing the flip.
Sure.
And then when everything took off in 2008, as far as my foreclosure business stuff, I was just glad to not have that property because everything went crazy for me.
So did you end up selling it then before the actual the market tumbled, or did you?
Yes, yeah.
Oh.
I want to say I sold it 2 months before the actual craziness started.
Right. Okay. Cool.
So I mean, there was at the time there was on the news and everything like that. There was talks of, this can't last.
Right.
Blah blah blah. We foreshadow this coming. Blah blah blah. All that stuff was coming. I was getting really nervous. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
So you got pretty lucky then, potentially, right?
I did. Yeah, I did. And it's funny because I continuously, I always check up on my stuff, my old stuff, and what I've done in the past, and see what it's worth. That property today is worth almost $400.
Okay.
So the property value went up there. I mean, we went through a downturn, and then we're coming back up a little bit now.
Sure.
So I mean, I think at that point I did a good job, and I forwarded the property on, and they're got some equity in it, and it all works. All works.
Cool. So that was the first flip, and that was 9 years ago, right?
Right.
Roughly.
Yeah.
Actually 10, 11.
10. Oh, yeah. It was a while ago. It seems like forever.
We're getting old.
Right.
So tell me about. I know then you focused on the foreclosure servicing you were doing, which I know has a lot to do with what kind of how we met and what started our relationship. I don't remember specifically what started it, honestly, but obviously we started working together probably, I told the audience during the intro, probably 5 or 6 years ago. I can't remember specifically.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you were doing a lot of the contracting work and the general preservation stuff for the banks, and then that kind of grew into your interest in getting back into flipping houses and potentially investing in rentals at some point. So let's talk about the last couple deals you've done, which are all, some of the things I want to get out to the audience is, your experiences kind of starting from scratch again as a flipper, even though you've got the contractor, you've got the background in the general contracting, which I think is an advantage that a lot of, obviously most people don't have, but
right.
Let's talk about the last couple deals.
Yeah, I think the advantage comes when you watch these shows on TV, on HGTV and stuff like that. And, you've got these people that think that they can go in and flip houses, and they're paying these contractors. Oh, how much is it to change a water heater? Oh, $5,000. Okay, let's do it. Those people. I just kind of laugh at those people because. The prices that they're paying for doing general work and general construction work is outrageous on TV. I'm sure it's inflated on TV and so forth to make it more dramatic. Yeah. But I mean, being in the construction industry, it helped. My favorite part. Everybody's got their favorite part of what they do, and my stuff is basic, interior trim work and so forth. And so essentially I got back into flipping, and it was one of the properties that I had inspected for Tannis Group, I cleaned it out for Tannis Group. I winterized it for Tannis Group. Cut the grass for it for Tannis Group. I was the first one in the property, after the previous owner had left it in shambles and basically walked away from the property. That's one of the advantages that I have. I get to see a lot of the properties, especially the foreclosures, that when the people just leave, I'm the first one in there. I get to assess it myself. I get to say, okay, there's $50,000-$60,000 worth of repairs needed. Here's how much I evaluate it at. Here's, every time I go to a property, rekey it, or whatever I have to do at those properties, those foreclosure properties, that's what I'm doing. I'm constantly looking for deals. The downside is that not a lot of the banks will offer the property to an investor first.
Right.
Fannie, Freddie, those companies actually, first-time home buyers, that's their main goal.
Right.
In selling those properties. So those are a little harder to come by, but there are still banks out there that we deal with that,
sure.
I can be first in line. This one property happened to be in Carpentersville. I was the first one in. Looking at it from the outside, you could barely see it. Trees everywhere, and trees going through the roof, and so forth. But I walked in, and the bones were there. I don't know how you do it, Joe, but when I originally walked through a property, I'm looking at the end game as far as what I could make the property and what I can, eventually turn it into, and how much I expect it to sell at that point.
Right.
If I walk into a property, whereas I can see it as, okay, I can add a bedroom here, I can add a bathroom there, up the value of those two things, and essentially, and then I'll, once I'm done with my work for the day, I'll sit in my truck and I'll say, hey, here's how much I expect renovation to be, blah, blah, blah. And, I'll say, hey, I'm really interested in this property. This particular property came back, the numbers worked. So I have an investor that I like to call a ghost investor. He happens to be a family member. Sure. And, he's always, kind of, been pushing me in the direction, hey, let's flip some houses. Let's do some of this. You're in that business. Let's see what we can do. Right. So,
right.
that day when I rekeyed that property, I called him up and I said, hey, I think I've got a property. Here's the stats. I'll send you an email. Here's what I think. Here's what I'm going to do with it. Here's the expected amount of money I'm going to spend. And here's the sale price, here's the expected profit.
Right.
And he said, hey, let's do it. So the property came on the market. I believe I was the first. We were the first initial offer.
Yep.
And, I think we had a couple other offers that raised my price a little bit more. I think we went up like $5,000 or something like that. It was like $120,000 property. And there's no kitchens, there was no baths, there's no light fixtures, there was no hand railings, there's no carpet, there was nothing. It was just a basic bones house, and I had figured originally I could sell it, close to $250. The problem with that was that I didn't feel that the neighborhood could support the $250 evaluation. And so essentially I went back, I did the numbers, and 225, anywhere from 200 to 225 is where I came back. So I basically ran the numbers backwards, figured out how much I could spend and whether or not I could do it for that price. So my investors, we did it. We closed on the property, I think in a couple weeks. It was pretty quick closing. Got the property, got in there, ran into an issue with permits. The property was actually in a subdivision that was like a how do you say it? I don't even know what it was. Joe, do you remember?
You mean unincorporated?
It wasn't. It was Lake Marion. I don't remember exactly what it was. It wasn't unincorporated because it had a standard address, but it was a subdivision in DuPage County, Kane County, that had its own, I think it was annexed or something of that nature. So I ran into an issue getting a permit to do all of the work. The permit place, Kane County, basically required me to do all this testing, and the property did have mold as well. The basement was flooded. So essentially the county required me to do a bunch of testing, remediation, and so forth, which I did all myself. A lot of people believe that when you buy a property, you have to have it professionally remediated, and that's not always the case. You can do the remediation yourself as long as the test comes back negative. You're in the clear, because essentially that puts the blame on the testing company.
Yeah, I mean, but again, like, before you get too far into that's going to be somebody who knows what they're doing to some degree. I mean, you have experience.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do that for the banks. I do that for so forth, and it's not something that I would recommend to a novice whatsoever.
Right.
But if you have a general knowledge, if you did a little research and online and figured out, reading some books on it and so forth, you can actually purchase the chemicals that the big companies use to kill that nasty stuff. And it's not that hard, and if you protect yourself, it's not that dangerous.
Right.
So I did that on my own. Basically took an extra almost 3 weeks to get the actual permit to start work, which I did not figure. So did all the work, put in the kitchen, a couple baths. I added a bedroom. This property was a split level property, so I added it had a split level with a basement. So I added a bedroom into the bottom split level part, which made it a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath from a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath.
Right.
So added a little bit of value there, and essentially did it I think in 3 months, start to finish, with all the permit issues and inspections and so forth. And then we had it sold within 30 days, I think.
Yeah, I think we had it under contract pretty quick.
Yeah, it was under contract pretty quick. That one went fairly well. I think we purchased it at 190. We sold it to 15.
No, we purchased.
I'm sorry, not 190. We purchased it at 119. Sorry.
I think it was lower than that. I think. I mean, not that we're going to argue, but I thought you picked it up for like 105.
I think that was my initial offer, and then I think we got driven up with other offers.
Okay.
And because you vouched for me with the bank on that one. You said this is a good buyer. Yeah. So we got the property at, we'll call it 120.
Yep.
And I think we put 40 into it, all in at 160. We ended up selling it for 215.
Yep.
Which is, it's fairly uncommon. I would call it, I've heard you call it a unicorn before.
That was a good deal.
It's a good deal, and we're blessed to have it. And we owe part of that to Tanis Group and to Mr. Mueller.
That's me.
And yeah.
Well, I want to talk about that real quick, because there's two things that you're bringing up that I just want to reiterate. One is, you brought up something I think that's really important, that a lot of, especially since we're kind of focusing on the fact that this is like a newer investor success stories. When you look at these properties, you have a vision of, what can I do to take this footprint and make it something better, to actually add value to the property besides just the rehab. Like, you're talking about adding bedrooms, adding bathrooms. I mean, there are investors out there that do that on a routine level, is every part of their rehab, but you were kind of walking right into the game, like, what can I do to take this 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath and make it a 4-bedroom, 2.5 bath, thus adding, another, 15, 20 grand, approximately worth of value. And I think most investors, when they're getting started, they don't really think that way. They're just looking at, what can I do to get in and out of this property quickly. I hear about other investors doing this. It seems pretty easy. Let's just fix up stuff. What can we do to minimize work, and as opposed to really digging into the bones of the property and making it, increasing the value naturally just by adding to it, which I think is incredible. The second part is, you brought up like working with Tannis, which I appreciate the plug, but ultimately, like you said, I mean, it's not that easy to find these banks that have inventory that are actually willing to sell to investors right out of the get-go. And what had happened in this situation was we were in a multiple offer, and the asset manager for the bank, which is a they're a regional bank. It's not a little local mom and pop bank, but they were a bigger bank. They were faced with the decision of, what do I do when I've got offers that are basically very similar to each other? Because we submitted all the offers. I mean, you really weren't given there was no unfair advantage.
Right.
But,
and you specifically submitted those offers because that's your job. So
offers went in, and I'll be honest. I think we had one. If I remember right, I thought we had one that was actually a little bit higher than yours. That was also a cash offer, but the asset manager recognized that I was representing you on the buy side, and basically called me and said, "Hey, this is your buyer. Like, this guy's going to close, right?" I'm like, "Yeah, absolutely, 120% positive he's going to close." And they said, "Okay, well, we're willing to take, a little bit less money," which I think literally was like $500 or something. But we're willing.
It wasn't much.
Yeah, we're willing to take less in order to make sure this deal closes because we're taking your word for it. So the thing I want to point out to the people that are listening as a newer investor is, it's not so much that you need to call Joe Mueller from Tannis Group. It's that you need.
Yeah, you do.
Yeah, you do. You need you need to work with a broker that actually has experience in the niche that you're trying to invest in. So whether it's the relationships with the banks, whether it's the fact that they know the sellers, of a regular retail property, those things are important because it's a relationship business when it comes down to it. So don't just call. I've said this before, but your second cousin who just got their real estate license 6 months ago, who decides they want to represent flippers, probably not the best guy or gal to start out with. I mean, maybe down the line once they've got a couple deals under their belt, work with somebody that's got experience in that investment market, because they're going to be able to help you succeed. Is all I want to bring across.
Right.
So
it makes sense. Absolutely makes sense when you know that a broker that you're dealing with has experience in the business that you want to be in. Those are the people that you need to network with. You need to talk with. You need to ask questions to. Those are the people that you need to seek out and actually use and get their advice and take it to heart, because they're the ones doing it. The mom and pops that just start up, just got their license and so forth. If you want to sell with them and get them some experience and get on their good side and give them a property that way, that's one thing. But buying the properties, it's a whole nother ball game than selling.
Yep.
Selling these days is essentially, you're putting it on a bunch of websites and MLS, and you're letting all the other agents do the work. Essentially, it's not
100%.
It's not rocket science these days.
No, it's not. No, it's not.
And so having the experience broker do the work for you. Maybe they're doing CMAs for you. I think on this one I called you up and I'm like, hey, can you give me the comps for this area?
Sure.
Blah blah blah. And you did it. I think we did it over the phone, and I said, hey, it's a good deal.
Right.
And I told you I was in on it and that I'd get the money, and it all worked out. So
yep.
Yeah, that's getting back into it. After construction business slowed down, that helps. And having the relationship that we had and still do, it helped me. It was a huge help. Because otherwise I'd be going into it blind, and that's the first time flippers and so forth like that. You're basically going into it blind, and having that broker that has that experience it's worth its weight in gold. That's how I consider it. So
well, I think it's even on the wholesaler side, when you're working with wholesalers. Obviously, we talk about that a lot on the podcast, and you and I kind of talk about wholesaling quite a bit. I mean, there's so many. Even last night we had a meeting last night at the office. We had one of the meetup group meetings with Dan Clarton's group. I think it's called the Investor Action and Accountability Group. We had a couple newer people there that were talking about how they wanted to wholesale in order to kind of get started, and once they made some money, they're gonna get into flipping and owning rental property. And it's interesting to have those conversations because they really don't know what to do, even if they got a contract on a property at a good price. The next couple steps, I mean, it's not as simple as just getting a property under contract and just throwing out an email blast and hoping that it closes. Cross your fingers. There's a process. So again, going back to the relationship side of the business, you got to have the right contacts. You got to get to know people in your market. You got to deal with people that have experience. And yeah, everyone's got to get started. But then if you're working with a wholesaler that doesn't necessarily have a lot of experience, but maybe brought you a good opportunity, consult with someone who knows what they're doing that can help you guys get through the process to get the property closed. Because it's not that simple. But
it's not, and that relates to the third flip that I'm doing right now.
Okay.
Where this property, I was working on the second flip, which was in Crystal Lake, which was a Dan Clarton wholesale deal.
Right.
The third property basically fell in my lap. My drywaller guy that was doing the work at the second flip that I just closed on, basically came to me and said, "Hey, you want to buy a house down the road? My buddy's getting a divorce, and they just want to unload the house."
Right.
And I was thrown into the wholesale side of the business, hand over foot. I was thrown in there, thrown in the water, and I basically said, "Yeah, of course I want to buy a property." So I went and looked at the property, and the situation was basically the husband and wife had got divorced. She was the one that was making all of the money and paying all the bills. He was unemployed at the time, and essentially she left him, so he was at the house and he couldn't afford the house, the payments on the house as far as the electric, the taxes, and so forth.
Right.
Found out later that his mother owned the house free and clear, and that she originally bought it as a rental way back in like 1985. I want to say it was a really long time that she's owned this property.
Right.
And she had let her son. She had trusted the property and entrusted the property to her son and his wife at the time. And now that they got divorced and he couldn't afford to live at the property, they wanted to unload the property.
Right.
So I went there and had an initial talk with them, and her number was right about, it's a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath property that had an addition on the back, that was kind of a 4-season room, but not really. It was fully insulated, and it was a nice addition, nice wood ceiling, and a nice addition.
Yeah, I remember seeing it. Yeah.
And she basically came back. Her number was at 150 from all of her internet searches and stuff like that. She's like, "I want 150 for the property," and I told her I couldn't do it. Straight up to her face, I said, I can't do it. I told her my number was more around the one, and I had, my initial assessment of the property was, this is a great rental. It's ready to go. It's going to make money for sure. I did, before I even got there, I was running the comps on my phone, running the rental numbers. I think I even called you.
Yep.
And said, hey Joe, help me out with this. Let me know what you think. What do you think rent's going to be? Blah blah blah. Rental came back. I think it was like $1,500 or $1,600. The property next door is almost the same property, and it's renting for $1,650. And so I was like, wow, that's fairly good numbers. That I got to see what I can get the property for. So
right.
She originally came back at 150. I basically told her I can't do that. I was more in the 130-ish range, and I said, you know what? Here's the deal. I said, let me try to get, and wholesaling this is my first wholesale deal, so I didn't know what to do. I'm Mr. Honest when it comes to construction work, to anything. If I think it's going to cost $3,000 to put in your kitchen, that's how much I charge you. I don't.
Right.
I can charge them $8,000. No, I charge $3,000 and that's it. So I told her, I said, I'm at the 130 mark. Let me do this. I gave her Dan Clarkton's number, and Dan, if you're listening, I'm sorry the deal didn't work out for you. But Dan came back and he offered what he felt, the property was worth and what he was willing to do on the property. It's two different business models between Dan and I about what he expected to do with the property and what I expected to do with the property.
Sure.
And the lady took the offer, and from Dan, which was, I believe, he offered a monthly payment for X amount of years, and was going to do it as a rental or, assign the contract to someone and wholesale the property.
Right.
So I basically gave that to Dan. Dan went there. As soon as Dan left, she called me back. And she said, well, Dan was just here. Will you give me $115 for the property? And I said, absolutely. I'll be right there.
Yeah,
So,
that was a little bit of a tag team deal. I like it.
It was kind of the good cop, bad cop, which was not planned whatsoever.
Right.
We did not plan that. We had talked about doing that, to where it could work to some people's advantage, but we had not planned it, and it just fell in our lap.
Sure.
And I ended up purchasing the property, which that property I told her I would give her $115 all in, which I guess was a kind of an unconventional type of offer for what you say. Essentially, she paid all the real estate taxes. She paid all of my closing costs. She paid all of my. She paid everything. I was all in at $115.
Right. So you basically said, like, I'm going to give you a net sale price of $115. No, nothing more. Any other costs that go into this transaction, it's coming out of her pocket.
Exactly.
No, I love it. I think that's great.
And I wish real estate transaction would be more of that, straightforward kind of thing, kind of like you're buying a car. Here's how much it costs.
Right.
But then they always add the taxes. They always add the dealership fees. They always add this, blah blah blah.
Sure.
It would be, it'd be great if you said, okay, here's how much I'm going to give you. Either you take it or you leave it. And that's what I did. And she took it. She signed the contract. Actually, I took the contract to her lawyer. She didn't even want to see the contract. I took the contract to her lawyer, who was a divorce lawyer. I don't know how that worked in there, but
Sure.
I guess lawyers are lawyers. And
Lawyers are lawyers. Yep.
and she looked over the contract, basically called me and said, hey, this is not a contract, and it was actually a contract that you forwarded me.
Right.
That you use in your wholesale stuff. And I said, yeah, absolutely, it's a contract. If she signs it, she's she's bound to do it. And we went that direction, and the lawyer agreed, okay, it's a contract. We closed on the property, I think in 10 days, 12 days.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
And I guess when you've got the cash to flaunt in somebody's face, they jump as hard as they can. Which, I immediately called my investor. We immediately got going on the deal, and purchased the property, and that one's currently under construction, almost done. And that was 2 months ago. 2 months ago. Yeah. This property was originally, when I walked through it, I originally thought it was going to be a rental. And after purchasing it at that 115 number and doing some more comps in the area, and actually, because it went really fast, I didn't have time to sit down and really, really look at everything, which you always want to do your due diligence. You always want to do that. This was a very fast deal. I had to run over there kind of scenario. After looking at all the numbers, I felt that addition on the back could be made into a fourth bedroom, and then I could also, because it was a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath, so I basically changed it to a 4-bedroom, 2-bath.
Right.
So I added a shower to the first floor bath, which is kind of awkward as far as, having a shower on your first floor, because essentially all your guests are going to use that bathroom. But essentially I made the shower into a super fancy shower.
Yep.
So it's more of a showpiece as opposed to a, super functional, basic stand-up shower. It's kind of a showpiece. So I think that buyers will look at it and say, hey, that's kind of cool. Never mind the awkwardness of having a bathroom on your first floor or a shower on your first floor.
Now, we put a shower in my first floor bathroom at my house.
You did.
Yeah.
You did, and that's where the idea came from. We did your shower as a super fancy shower. It's like a car wash kind of thing, and and it works.
Right.
You never know when you're going to have a guest that stays over
Sure.
and says, "Hey, can I use your shower?" Hey, go for it. Kind of thing. So, after doing the comps and so forth, we bought it at $115. I expect to list at $240 and probably sell it. I'm going to list it at $240. Wait until you haven't seen it.
I saw the before. I haven't seen what you've done to it.
It's amazing.
Oh yeah.
Amazing. Yeah.
Good one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I kind of went above and beyond, and I guess that's what I do. But the way that I flip properties versus the way a lot of other people flip properties is I use a lot of my sweat equity, a lot of it. I do a lot of excess trim work. I do a lot of over and above stuff, the stuff that you see on TV, but it doesn't cost me that much money.
Sure.
Because I do it all myself. And I'm a big preacher of work. Your rewards will be earned in the end. So,
sure.
I put in all this extra work to do this stuff. I'm expecting to list at $240, and I expect to sell at about $225 in the end. So,
okay.
I always list high. That's kind of part of my deal. And I know you beat me up about it, and you call me crazy, and you laugh at me, and you no, you don't laugh at me. Well, maybe you do.
Maybe a little bit.
Nice. But I still win in the end, don't I?
Yeah, it's been working. It works. I'm just more of I'm just more of a, and I just had this conversation with another investor last night. I'd rather price it appropriately. I take that back. The way you do your work, it's a little bit different because you're doing such an improvement to the property that, it's hard for me to see. We have an expectation of what the potential price could be, but when you're doing the rehab quality that you're putting into these properties, a lot of times it creates a challenge on, my end to really put a hard and fast number on it. And the converse side of that is I can always tell, when an investor lists a property too high that did a bunch of shit work and ends up trying to put lipstick on a pig, and I've brought up stuff like that before where they don't even put a lot of effort into the rehab, and they just try to, like I said, lipstick the pig, and then in the end, they're priced $20,000 or $30,000 higher than they should be. There's no way that it's going to sell at that pricing. But your situation's a little bit different. So
yeah. Well, the last one that we just closed on yesterday, literally had, I believe it was 32 walkthroughs and multiple second walkthroughs within a 30-day period.
Right.
So. I guess that would kind of give you an idea of the type of property that I'm putting out. It's very eye appealing. So if somebody sees it online, they go, "Holy cow, I got to go see that." And, just getting the people to walk through is the main thing.
Right.
We went through a lot of people. I think we only got 2 offers. We got one initial offer, and then the offer that I accepted, which was a full price offer.
Right.
Which is another story.
Sure. Well, I kind of want to talk about this last deal just because, the inspiration for the podcast came for the fact that you just picked up a big fat check from the title company yesterday, which is what it's all about. So,
right.
We kind of digress to the one you're currently finishing up, so that one's going to hit the market soon. So that'll be your third rehab in the last, last year or so, year and a half?
Yeah, about that.
Okay. So let's talk about the second one, which you just closed, as far as sold to an end buyer. Let's go over the numbers on that one and how it all kind of went down, and then
Okay.
let's talk about your one-eyed appraiser friend and how that works out.
Yeah, the one-eyed appraiser, right?
Yes.
This second property, which I guess we're going backwards, but
That's okay.
the second property we picked up. This was a deal from, I believe it was you had originally called me on it and said, hey, you want to go check out this property?
Right.
And it ended up being a Dan Clarton deal.
Right.
Where the initial owner of the property, her husband had died a couple months back, and she had actually gone into a assisted living type scenario.
Right.
She didn't have any family in the immediate area, and basically gave power of attorney to one of the neighbors,
Right.
who was a CPA, which she had never done a power of attorney like that before, obviously. Basically, you and me both, we met up at the property, ran through it, came up, worked our numbers backwards, figured, hey, this could sell for 240-ish, easy, lower to mid 200s, all day long.
Right.
And
Right.
I think our initial number was, hey, let's I forgot what did I pay for that one? I don't remember.
I think you paid $115 for it.
I was going to say it was $115. Yeah.
Yeah, I think.
And
so.
that was with the assignment fee as well, I believe. So.
Yep. Yeah, there was. I think there was like a $7,000 or $8,000 assignment built into that.
Yep, there was. Which, I'm happy to pay if somebody's willing to find me a property and has a connection, or a lot of people would frown at that $8,000 off the top. That a lot of people would frown at that, but the amount of work and effort that it takes to find these properties and get those properties under contract or do what you got to do is it's a lot. It's a grind. It's a lot of hustling. It's huge work.
Right.
And I see the value in it. A lot of people may not. I do. And if it helps me, and it may not help everyone, because essentially a lot of flippers, they've got their contractors that they use, and they pay them a set price for X amount, and they've got everything runs like a robot, and it's not always a robot for everyone.
Right.
And
right.
someone like me, it works for me because I've got the equity of being able to do the property and do all the work on the property myself. I've got that equity that I can work in there as far as paying that $8,000 up front. Hey, let's do it. The numbers work for me.
Right.
So we got the property. I think we closed on that one in 2 weeks too. I think we closed that fairly quick as well.
And that
cash.
just an interesting point to bring up. That was a personal connection that Dan Clarton had through one of the other neighbors, I believe, is how he found it. But I believe the initial, and he might be able to correct me, so I might be wrong here, but I thought the initial way that it came to him was he was forwarded a link through Facebook because it was on like a Facebook garage sale site, like the Crystal Lake garage sale site, and he realized, or the person that sent it to him knew that he was, that he's a wholesaler, and said, hey, you might want to talk to this lady because they're going to be dumping off this house, and here it is on the Facebook garage sale site. And that's how it worked out. So kind of interesting.
Yeah. And I think the neighbor, I think, was also bidding on the property as well.
Were they?
Yeah, I think so, because after we got the property, and he said, he came over and talked to me. He's like, oh, congratulations, blah blah blah. I couldn't see making that number work, and blah blah blah. So I believe we were bidding against him. So, or Dan was, not me, but Dan was originally. So.
Really?
Yeah.
I don't know if we knew that.
So. Well, now you know. So,
right.
but yeah, Dan, I see what Dan does. Dan goes out there and hustles, and and signs and phone calls, and holy cow, I can't even imagine how much work it is. So
it's a huge amount of work.
So that one, I gladly paid the $8,000 assignment fee, and I knew what it was, And, you've talked before on your podcast about how, lawyers and so forth going through the contracts, and, they say, hey, what's this $8,000 for, and so forth, and,
Right.
Whatnot. We actually got a lawyer that was well-versed in that type of sale. And we closed it in 2 weeks, and, no problems, and got working on it right away. The property itself was a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath property, full basement, 2-car garage attached, in Crystal Lake. And basically the lady was a book hoarder. The lady had books after books after books after books. When Joe and I originally saw the property was being cleaned out, and you walk into the basement and you could hardly walk. So we couldn't really see everything as we'd like to, but we knew what we're capable of, and we knew what our end game was, and so I felt that we could make an offer. I talked to my investor, made the offer, got it done, closed deal. So we started working on the property. We got there. There was still some stuff left, which I was okay with. That's what I do for a living. I clean out houses. So there was still some stuff left that I agreed to basically make the deal go faster. And instead of waiting for her to clean out all the stuff, I said, just leave it and let's close it. So we had a little bit of garbage left in there, and got into the property, and the basement had some mold discoloration in it. And basically it was from the lady leaving the window open because she couldn't reach the window because of all her books. So she had left it open at one point, and it was more like an easement window, so it had a cover on it. So rain was just kind of seeping in there, and there's a little bit of discoloration, which I didn't originally see, which I remediated myself and tested, and it's all good. Then I basically, what I like to do when I get into a property, and I like to figure my end buyer, what type of buyer I'm looking for. And this particular property, this would be a high-end first-time buyer, is what I figured, to where they've got a significant amount of money to put down, over the 20%, and they're looking for a specific type of house, or I was looking for a buyer that was kind of an executive kind of buyer that was looking for a smaller house after their kids have already gone, and they're looking for a higher end house that they could relax in. So essentially I built the property to do exactly that. I struggled with the comps, because having a 3, 1.5 in that particular area, it was one of the lower end properties. Not lower end as far as the style of the house or anything like that. The style was perfect, matched everything else in the neighborhood, but everything else was either 4.2, 4.5, and so forth. So essentially I struggled with the idea of putting a basement bathroom in, which for me to do, it would have cost me probably $2,500, $3,000 to do. Breaking up concrete and putting in a stand-up shower and so forth to make it a 3-bedroom, 2.5. And I struggled with it because I had enough room in the basement, but it wasn't part of my original plan. So I axed that idea, and I basically went with a high-end finish plan where I did 5-piece wainscoting in the living room, dining room, kitchen, first floor bath. I did a really nice wood floor. I did like in the kitchen cabinets, I did a 4-piece crown molding, and so forth like that. And those types of finishes that are easy for me to do, they may not be, and they may be pretty pricey for the standard flipper to do, to call their contractor and say, hey, I want 5-piece wainscoting on these walls. That contractor is going to, his eyes are going to light up as dollar signs.
Right.
So he, for me to do it, it's sweat equity. That's all it is.
Right.
And the hard work to do that stuff paid off in the end. Because when you look at a property that has those high-end finishes online versus just a standard flip, which there was one down the street that came up for sale 2 weeks before mine did,
Right.
and was priced higher than mine, but it had more bedrooms. I'll give them that, and one more bath. But it was priced higher than mine, which at that point I felt that it was, it was priced right around the 250 range.
Sure.
And I think we came in at 250. We originally priced it at 255, shooting for the stars.
Okay.
And after the first, I think it was like right at 30 days, we had 30 people walk through it. And I lowered the price $5,000 against Joe Mueller's recommendation. We only lowered it $5. Joe recommended $10, which my particular situation where I don't have carrying costs. Like I don't have a hard money loan on the property. I don't have a standard loan on the property. It's my ghost investor. I don't have any expenses. Holding in an extra couple days or an extra month doesn't cost me as much as a standard flipper that's got loans and hard money and that type of scenario. So I don't mind. And I'd rather get the price that I'm looking for than just drop it and sell it quick.
Right.
And, that's kind of my, and I don't believe I've ever told you that. And that's like my game plan. That's on everything. That's my game plan. Get maximum value because essentially it's not costing me anything to do that. So yeah, we flipped the property. I think we got the property at 115. We put 60 into it. We're all in at 175. We walked away with a check yesterday for almost 225.
Nice.
So, I mean, I guess you could call that a second unicorn. If you're like
a unicorn breeder.
I'm a unicorn magnet. How about that?
There you go.
And no, essentially I chalk it up to the hard work, and it's not just me. It's my family does a lot of work at the properties. My wife and kids actually come help me paint. They're great painters, which as soon as they hit 16, 17, and they're going to be looking for handouts to go play with their friends, I'm going to say, hey, let's get the paintbrushes going and let's do some painting.
Put them on the payroll. I love it.
Yep, exactly. So you got to teach them right from the start. So
that's a good idea. I love it.
Any place that you can get sweat equity from, or any type of method, or anything that you can do on your own, I'm a strong believer that that's going to pay off in the end. And this particular property, it did, and I'm grateful for that.
Awesome. So you got yourself a nice big check today. You're going to run it over to your investor and get it deposited, and hopefully cut some checks back and forth, I'm guessing.
Yep.
So today's a good day for Tim. We're recording a podcast to kind of go over. So just kind of wrapping it up, I mean, what type of advice would you had a lot of great advice for the listener. A lot of stuff people haven't said yet, which I think is awesome. What else do you want to add, maybe, just to kind of bring it out there to some of these people that are just getting started, newer investors, or maybe experienced investors? Because obviously we call them unicorns, but these are deals beneath everyone's noses. It's not like this is not something that is impossible to accomplish. I think part of a little bit of the attitude you have is a little bit different. Is you're pretty diligent on not just accepting whatever property comes to the table. I mean, you're pretty good about doing your research and hunting down the right deal instead of just jumping on whatever opportunity falls in your lap. So I think that's a point to bring up. But what else do you want to add, maybe, so we can kind of talk about that for a minute?
I guess I would, I'm a strong believer in the hard work. That's the main thing. If it totally fries my brain that you see these people on TV that go out there and they make it look like, oh, we made $300,000 on this one property in California. Like, come on, there's no way. I mean, unless you're doing major construction, changing the property, adding huge bedrooms, adding ridiculous amount of stuff and spending a ridiculous amount of money, you're not going to, it's just, your return on investment is not there. There's no way.
Right.
And, you know, you got to do your due diligence. You absolutely have to do that. You have to know your end game. You have to know who you're actually shooting for. Like the property in Carpentersville, I knew my buyer. I knew the buyer before I even started work. I knew the person that would buy it, and that was the person that bought it. I mean, I knew that the person would have multiple. The specific property had an extra large driveway with some extra cars, where you could put some extra cars and so forth. So I structured the property towards that, and you know, by doing so, you know, if you know your markets and you know the people that you're shooting for, it all ends up in the end. The same thing happened with this last property that I just closed yesterday. I knew the buyer would be a first-time home buyer, and I knew that they'd want the high-end finish. The people came from Chicago they were renting high-end apartments, just had their first kid. They just out of college, first-time home buyers.
Right.
They were looking for something, you know, they had more than 20% down. They had a great offer, and I knew it going in. That's what I was looking for. And it's, you know, whether it takes 30 or 50 people to walk through the house, you know, and you know how many times I got to mop the floor, it doesn't matter to me. That's, you know, that's what you got to do to get to that end buyer. And the buyers are out there. I mean, you know, the way the market's looking now, you know, to me, it's looking as a seller's market at this point.
Absolutely, it's a seller's market.
100%. And if you've got the properties, and if you market it as a specific property to a specific buyer, and you want to get that higher end evaluation. Oh, we never even talked about the one-eyed appraiser.
Oh, that's fine. We got time. Go for it.
Going to the evaluation of the property.
Right.
The particular property, we got a full price offer at $249,900.
Right.
Which I was ecstatic about. You know, that's exactly what I wanted. No sale contingency, just a mortgage contingency, and so I accepted the offer, and got down, went through the inspection. Inspection was great. I had a few little things to fix. They wanted me to add a railing in the garage for the one step, which was weird to me, but okay, I'll do it. You know, little stuff like that. You know, nothing major. So I agreed to everything. Obviously, you know, that's the best thing you can do, is treat your buyers like they're kings and queens and so forth. And always, I'm almost always going to accept any type of repairs, because I've gone through the property myself already. I'm going to accept any kind of repairs that you want to do, because I do them myself. It's not going to cost me that much money. I'm almost always going to do that.
Right.
So we did that. I accepted that. We had the appraiser walk through. I met the appraiser there, which I actually heard Chris Davis. Shout out to Chris Davis.
Yep.
And he had mentioned on one of his podcasts with you,
yep,
that, hey, you know, you should meet your appraiser there to show them what was done.
Right.
I mean, an appraiser is going to walk up to a property. They don't care that the roof's new. They don't care that the windows are new.
Well,
the siding's new.
They might not even. They don't know that.
Right.
I mean,
right.
It might look brand new, but for all they know, it's 2 years old, 5 years old. I mean,
right. They have no clue. So, and they're basically running through these properties, and they're doing all their work on the computer when they get home.
Right.
You know, they're basically there to take pictures. So they don't have a clue about what's new and what you did and so forth. So, I met the appraiser there, where I was in the property. I was doing the repairs for the sale, putting up that little handrail, and the appraiser walked in, and he literally had an eye patch over his one eye, and he was a big heavy-set dude that had a limp, and basically walked into my property, and the property had like an entry foyer kind of thing where you step down into the main house, and he almost killed himself. he almost lost it, and I almost lost it myself, because, you know, if you're going to come evaluate my property, and, you know, nothing against the one-eyed guy, but you know, I just want to make sure that you're going to evaluate it properly. And So I basically went through and talked to him. He was a nice guy, nothing against the guy. And I think it was like, he came on like a Friday, so I had to wait for the weekend to get the appraisal back or something of that nature. It's like 3 or 4 days I'm waiting, and finally it comes back and it's short, $244,000.
Right.
And $5,900 short. So in my situation, normally what I would do is I would kill the deal, because it doesn't cost me any money, and I would not necessarily kill the deal, I should say. I would go back to the buyers and say, hey, you need to come up with this money.
Right.
Which in a lot of cases would kill the deal. Which I did. I went back to the buyers and I said, hey, you offered me this amount of money. I need that amount of money. Because in my eyes, I mean, granted it's not standard real estate talk and so forth. In my eyes, something is only worth what someone is willing to pay for it. So if you offered me $250,000 for this house, I believe that you should pay me $250,000 for this house. Sure. Regardless of what someone who walks through the property for 15 minutes, he was literally there for 15 minutes.
Right.
What that one person out of the tens of thousands of appraisers we have in the Chicagoland area, that one guy said it was $5,900 short.
Right.
So I basically went back to my buyer and I said, hey, you need to come up with the money. And they basically came back and said, no, we can't. We've got to put a deck in the back, and we want to do all this landscaping and blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, if you've got money to do that, you've got money to pay me. Either you want the house or you don't. And then we went back and forth a couple of times and almost killed the deal.
Right, I remember.
Which hey, money's money to me. It doesn't hurt me to keep the property an extra couple days, especially when I've got 30-something people walking through it. So went back and forth, and finally I offered them. I said, okay, I'm not going to do any of these other repairs, which the inspector found with the handrails and stuff like that. I think I put up with one handrail, and that was it. Because I was waiting for the appraiser that day, so I only did one thing, and. So I said, I'm not going to do any of the other repairs, which I probably valued at maybe $1,500. It was cut some trees back, change a GFI that wasn't working, stuff like that, right. Nothing major. Simple fixes. So I basically went back to them and I said, hey, I'm not going to do any of these other repairs. Take it or leave it. That's the deal. So they accepted that. I didn't do any of the other repairs. And we got pretty sold at $244, and we made some money. For sure. So
yeah, it sounds like a pretty healthy deal. I mean, it sounds like another unicorn. I love it. I think I might have to change the title of the podcast to something about a newer investor and his three new unicorns, which is awesome.
Yeah.
So I mean, I like the point you brought up. I think that's something that everyone needs to follow suit with, which is always meet your buyer's appraiser at the property. Some of the things that I've done in the past and I've heard of other investors doing is actually having proof of, like, sometimes the before and afters as well. So if you're buying a real hunk of junk, filled with mold or whatever the situation is, it's a good idea to maybe have some before pictures there as well, so he gets conceptually can visualize, like, literally how much work went into the property, or she. So that's a great point. And be there to answer questions and advise, what the potential cost and value of some of the repairs is, because that's what it comes down to as well. Is if you're dumping, $50,000 into a property and that appraiser doesn't really have an idea of how much money really went into it, it's it's the investor's job to push that information onto him. So
right, and he did ask me how much money did I invest in the property.
Okay.
When we were there, he did ask me, how much money do you think you've got into it? I told him straight out, here's how much I've got into it, and he wrote it down on his little notepad, and
right.
Went about taking pictures. So
right.
It definitely, I think it paid off a little bit. Because secondly, he didn't even go into the basement. I said,
really?
He's ready to leave, and I said, aren't you going to go into the basement? And he's like, oh, there's a basement? I mean, eventually he would have found it, via the tax records or whatever. But
yeah, but that's
he didn't. And it just totally blew my mind. Like, hey, there's another door right there. You could have went down the door, and
wow.
I had to show him the basement. So
wow, that's a great point. I mean, yeah. So sometimes think about if you weren't there and he had no clue that there was a basement, and he just would have acted like it was obsolete when he did his appraisal. That could have knocked another $20,000 off the value. So
right, and it's a finished basement, so finished versus unfinished, you've got value there. So
absolutely.
Right.
All right. Well, I think that's about all we're going to do today, Tim. We've been on the podcast for like an hour and 20 minutes or something at this point.
Whoa. Wow.
Yeah, it's gone.
Time flies.
Time flies when you're having fun.
Yep.
Hopefully our listeners got a lot out of this one. A lot of good information. Thank you for taking the time and exposing your personal investment philosophies and some of the financials that go with it. I know that's not easy to do, and appreciate it.
Yeah, well, I appreciate you having me. It was fun. We should do it again.
We can do it again. I know we got to talk about working with contractors. That's going to be the next podcast we do.
Yes, I would love to do a contractor podcast.
All right, cool. All right, man. I will talk to you later. Thanks again for being on the show, and we'll talk soon.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Investor Empowerment Series radio show. Be sure to tune in next week for another empowering episode. We welcome your feedback, so please rate us on iTunes and Stitcher, and visit us at www.investorempowermentchicago.com or tennisgrouprealty.com.